When Steve Jobs was returning to Apple, one of the first things that he did was complain about the complexity of a product lineup that seemed to just span this wide breadth of unfocused territory. There were dozens of Mac SKUs that were being created, and none of them were great. In fact, he said that there was no way that even he could recommend one of those products to a friend. And so one of the first things that he did was simplify and focus that product line down to a set of devices that were much simpler to understand. And famously, the way that he did that was by narrowing it down to 4 products, from dozens to 4. Now, in the case of the Mac, he did that by drawing a quadrant with 2 axes. Number 1, the product had to either be a desktop product or a portable product. And number 2, the product either had to be consumer or professional. And part of the marketing of those products were tied to, number 1, how they were designed and developed, and number 2, what they were priced, what segment of the market they would go in. I think this is a great framework to understand how Apple has influenced the tech industry as a whole. This is a story that's repeated tons in the tech industry overall. More importantly, more relevantly, I think that this is a story that explains what OpenAI is doing with ChatGPT. Here's how that story played out. Eventually, when Jobs came back to Apple, he ended up launching the iMac, which was the consumer desktop product that Apple was going to do. Now, you'll see here that I have the quadrant. It's all set up nice and neat. I put some prices in there based off of what I quickly researched. They're not exact. I have not dug into these a little bit, but they're there to prove a point, which is that the consumer and the pro products are differentiated, as are the form factor of the product itself, the desktop versus portable. Now, the portable consumer product that they eventually released was the iBook. And you can see that that I prefix represented the consumer category that they were selling into. Eventually, they completely filled out this whole diagram. I forget the order in which it happened, but desktop pro computers were the Power Mac. And the portable pro computers were the Power Book. And so you end up with a full quadrant system here, where you have the 2 form factors that people are looking for and the 2 segments of the market that Apple is working to target. Now, again, you see the I's prefix the consumer category and the powers prefix the pro category. Those things would eventually change, right? Nowadays, you probably wouldn't see a Power Mac, you'd see a Mac Pro, right? And you wouldn't see a PowerBook, you'd see a Mac Book Pro, right? They say it right in the name. There's no reason to confuse everybody. This pattern would repeat itself, right? In fact, you probably wouldn't call this the portable category anymore. You'd call it the laptop category, because there are other things that are more portable, like the phone, the iPhone. Now, initially, when the iPhone launched, it would have fit squarely in the consumer box. And so what was it called? It was called the iPhone. And it is to this day, right? The iPhone 16. Over time, the iPhone became so popular and such an important part of Apple's business that it deserved a Pro line as well. And so eventually, Apple released the iPhone Pro, right, with some designation of the number. So the iPhone 16 Pro. Of course, the Pro line is priced at a certain amount. The consumer line is priced at a certain amount. And you can see every single time they call this the Pro product. This is what has been replicated throughout the tech industry, and the pricing matches as well. I quickly want to draw a parallel here with the Apple Vision Pro before we dive into ChatGPT Pro. So for here, you might call this category the Apple Vision or something like that, or maybe you'd call it something like I don't know, let's say the headset, or maybe AR. I don't know what you would call this category, right? But what I do know is that Apple is very intentional with the way that they name their products. And so for here, you've got the Apple Vision Pro and nothing else, right? But you can see that it implies something, that something will be in this category in the future, which is why people have been saying that the Apple Vision Pro is such a weird product. It's entering the market at the high end rather than the low end. And I've talked about it a ton on this channel, why that is significant and profound and different. But in a nutshell, I believe that is the case because this is technology that is bleeding edge and has not even penetrated into the consumer market's mind as something that should be purchased by the average consumer. And so why would you make a product dedicated to the consumer in that category? Apple has just chosen not to, whereas Meta has. I will leave that to other videos. There are plenty of videos on my channel that discuss that. But I think that there's an interesting parallel here with ChatGPT. Now, of course, ChatGPT does break this model a little bit because Plus and Free and Pro are three different price points. It's a freemium model to an extent. But for paying customers of ChatGPT, which I believe is not necessarily the future of the company, but at least is a strategic goal of the company, it shows you how this model is reflected in their structuring of the pricing. So when it comes to ChatGPT, we can extend this one more box down. ChatGPT. Well, ChatGPT has a free mode, but I don't even think that that is necessarily the consumer model. I would say some combination of ChatGPT and ChatGPT Plus are the consumer model for this. This is the same as like a streaming service, for example. So here, these are both ChatGPT Free and Plus. Now, of course, Free is $0. Plus is priced at $20. Let's take a look at ChatGPT Pro. Well, the interesting thing is that ChatGPT Pro is priced 10x of Plus, $200, which seems like a huge hurdle to get over, right? And this is where I think the parallels to the Vision Pro come in handy. You'll notice I didn't put the price for the Vision Pro on this diagram yet, and that was for a reason. And that's because this $3,500 price tag is, number one, ridiculous to most people. It seems inaccessible for many reasons. But number two, I think it's a statement of purpose for this. It's part of the marketing of the product. What I mean by that is that Apple Vision Pro is a bleeding edge piece of technology that does not have a consumer counterpart, is not designed for the average consumer or average user, and is really ultimately a developer kit, right? Both for Apple itself and for their broader development community. Thus, it is priced in a way that is mostly inaccessible except for to those that are most interested in it as a product, as a bleeding edge piece of technology that may be the next paradigm of computing. Well, go through that entire thing that I just said and find and replace ChatGPT or LLMs or AI for all of the things I said about Vision Pro, and you can see a model that applies here relatively similarly. In ChatGPT's case, when you look at this here, you might say something like, well, this is a nascent piece of technology that requires expert understanding, especially their more advanced O1 reasoning model, right, which doesn't have access to the web, doesn't have access to file uploads, doesn't have access to the advanced voice mode, right, all of the more consumery type things. It's purely good at solving specific problems that are usually very specific in domain, math, science, etc., right? Coding is another good one. And so what OpenAI is saying with this price tag is, listen, we don't want you to buy this product, which is sort of silly to think about. But that's the same thing that Apple is saying with their Vision Pro. We don't really want you to buy this product. Of course, they want some people to, but they only want people who are really serious and really know what they want this product for. That's what I mean when I say that the price is part of the branding, is part of the marketing. Okay, now that we've established that, let's get into a little bit more, right? If OpenAI thinks that they can price this at $200 to only reach a certain market, well, what are they saying with that price? What does $200 mean, right? Now, of course, I don't know, but if I read into things, here are my best guesses. The first thing to think about is what the difference between that $20 price tag and the $200 price tag mean. $20 a month is the price that someone might pay if they're paying for it out of their personal account, if they're paying for it out of their pocket. Oh, I really like this ChatGPT thing. It's free, it's limited. There's a couple things I've heard about this voice mode and about the search product that I might want access to, and so I can casually shell out $20 a month, a couple of lattes, right, from Starbucks for this product because I find so much use for it. It's a good consumer product in that sense. What about $200? Well, $200 a month is really pricey for an individual, right? It's priced more in the range of what an enterprise or professional might pay for access to a very powerful tool that helps them get more done in their work. In other words, you have to do a much more rational calculation about whether that price tag results in a bottom line that is useful to you, rather than sort of the fuzzier, sort of more emotional price of $20 a month. And so, $200 a month should be seen as kind of like a software as a service price for this product. The target audience here, I think, must be aimed at either early adopters, similar to Apple Vision Pro, or technologists and coders and mathematicians who maybe want to test out this product to see whether or not it actually can help them operate at a faster clip. Again, not the average user. Here's the big question about that. How big is that market? If this slot here represents something that they see as the future, well, how many people are in that pro category that can use these models to make their work better? We don't know because we don't know how useful this model actually is. That's part of this test that's going on. And that's kind of how I want to close out this video, which is that this product is a weird one right now. It feels more like a placeholder for future iterations than it does for the current existence of the product as a whole. It feels like the crystallization of a strategy of OpenAI rather than a super well thought through product in its own right, as it currently stands. And here's why. Well, when I paid for, let's go back up here. When I used to pay, or actually when I started paying for ChatGPT at the Plus level, well, it had access to the O1 model. A preview version of it, a more simple version of it, something that wasn't as productized yet, a cutting edge version of it. And I didn't use it much. I tested it out. I thought it was kind of interesting. It did seem a little bit better. It was cool to see it think through the way that it was processing the information and provide different options before selecting one and responding back to me. It was really cool to see the model think. But I didn't use it much. It wasn't a great product. Well, now, with the announcement of Pro, my access to this, which was mostly unlimited before, is now lost. It's reserved for this $200 price point, which to me is weird. You've made your $20 product less valuable, and your $200 product only slightly more valuable, which again, I think speaks to the weirdness of ChatGPT Pro as a product right now and the specificity of it as a professional product. So Plus loses access to O1 except for very limited, it's rate limited, and ChatGPT Pro gets, I believe, unlimited access to that model. Okay, great. The unfortunate thing is that now this tier has gotten a little less valuable. But I think, again, this finally gets to some of the rationale for why OpenAI has released this one. Before, when they were testing out something like O1, they would kind of shove it in to this plus their one paid product, which was a $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT. Now, when they release something, they are able to slot it in to this higher price point, right? The idea being that, well, for the cutting edge technology, you'll find that in the higher priced product, similar to Vision Pro. That makes a lot of sense. So this is probably the last time, I would guess, I would hope, that we will see Plus lose some of its features at the expense of a higher end version of the product getting access to those. But you'll see this sort of sliding scale of the most advanced products that require the most compute, that are the most valuable, slot themselves over time into that $200 price point. Whereas you'll get a little bit less access in Plus and even less access in Free, which we've already seen. And so you can kind of see the entire user journey from Free to Plus to Pro, depending on the type of user of ChatGPT that you are. And so while I don't know for a fact that that is why they have created this weird product in the meantime and priced it at $200, it is the explanation that makes most sense to me. And ultimately, it seems like a relatively good strategy for where OpenAI is positioned right now. Make products that you can sell to end users, priced at the level at which you want that end user to be sort of represented, $200 for professionals, $20 for consumers, free for those that are curious, and utilize those slots to insert, I guess in this case is not a quadrant, insert features into the sort of spectrum of feature usage along those price points where they make sense.